I don't know if your mic is working. Can you turn it on?
Nope, it wasn't. Welcome to the EOZ TV Live. Sorry for the technical glitch. I'm Elder.
Mrs. Elder.
And today, as we bring it to you live, we are going to talk about a story that was in the Telegraph, and it was in a number of other places. That's actually very interesting. There was it was from a couple of days ago, and it is about what you see over here is a picture, a very interesting picture. Let me bring it to the top so you can see the headline. This is from the Telegraph. It says, an Israeli police officer knocks a disabled Palestinian man out of his wheelchair. So the question is, what exactly was happening in this situation? And it looks bad. I mean, you look at it, and there's a video here too, and it looks really bad. That what happens is from the still picture as well as from the, I'll show you the still picture over here. Here you see the still picture, and you see an Israeli officer, and you see the guy falling on the ground.
Yeah, that just doesn't look right.
It doesn't look right, and the video is a little bit more complete. Now the video starts off a little bit differently, as the story mentions. What happened was there was what they said was a 14-year-old girl. It really wasn't a 14-year-old girl.
What was it?
She was 21.
Oh, really? And
yeah.
They said 14?
All of the story said it was 14 years old, yeah. But there was a 14-year-old girl. You see her sitting over there, and she had tried to stab a soldier in Hebron. And there she is. You can see her over there lying on the ground. So she had tried to stab a soldier in Hebron. And then you see in the scene, and we'll just show parts of the video, then you see she's lying there. Nobody's near her. Okay? Now, very often the Palestinians will complain that they leave these people after they're shot. And she was shot, and she's bleeding. And you can see that she's in pain. People often complain they leave them lying on the ground for so long, and they don't let anybody approach. And you see that happening over here.
Okay.
This is what they're doing.
Okay.
So let's go a little bit further. And there she is. Okay, you see her. She's lying there. She's still alive, actually, even though there are many Palestinian sources that said that she had died. And then, okay, no, sorry, let me go a little bit earlier. And you see over here on the right side here, there's a person pushing somebody with a wheelchair. And then the scene goes away, but there's a person pushing somebody with a wheelchair there. And later on, you see, there it is. We'll do it again. You see he's yelling at him, and he's telling him to go, and he knocks him over. Now, and everybody gets upset. Now, the Telegraph reported this and said, that she was, she was shot, and he said, and this is what they're quoting the wheelchair guy. He says, I saw blood coming out of her arm on my side, and I thought she was going to bleed to death. I tried to help her, but a police officer stopped me and ordered me to go back, and then he turned him over and hit his head on the ground. Now, if somebody could explain to me how a guy in a wheelchair would be able to administer first aid to a girl that's on the ground.
I don't know that I can say that he can, but the fact is that this is a no-win situation. She tries to stab an Israeli soldier. She gets shot.
Yeah.
The fact is that they have to stabilize the scene.
Yeah.
And they were doing everything they could to provoke a situation, and yet at the same time, this is not a win situation at all for anybody. This is sad to see.
Oh, it's very sad. No, definitely. However, here's what's important over here. I have, there's an Israeli who, or not an Israeli, actually, he's a lone soldier, but he was in the IDF, and he wrote up very specifically, because he knows how operating procedures work over here, and here's his picture. His name is Robert Stark.
Okay.
He put this on Facebook, in a closed Facebook groups, but I got permission from him to be able to post it over here.
Okay.
And he describes here, people don't understand how things work in an army. If you haven't actually been in an army and been in a terrorist situation, you don't know how things work, and these newspapers just don't get it. So, and this is the important thing, and of course the newspapers don't want to get it because they have this dramatic video showing what looks like cruel Israeli soldiers knocking over this poor guy in a wheelchair.
So what does he say?
So what he's saying is that, and I'm going to read parts of it.
Okay.
He says, This is not a crime scene. It's a scene of a terror attack. A still active scene which began only seconds before. At the moment, the woman was laying on the ground, alive but neutralized. Her bag was identified nearby and hadn't been checked yet. By protocol, this bag is immediately suspected to contain a bomb. A security perimeter is set up for a few different reasons. A, the fact that one terrorist gives reason to suspect another one. That the fact that when there's one terrorist, there's usually more. An attack that is not yet finished. So the perimeter protects the soldiers and the civilians they are guarding. Number two, B, the possibility is that the bag that she had is a bomb, can't be checked until the bomb disposal unit comes. So nobody can enter the area because if it explodes, then everybody gets killed. And that includes the Arabs. And number three is that the scene, she's in danger, okay, she needs help, but the last thing she needs for help is a whole bunch of people running around her who try to help her, which would really interfere because there's actually an ambulance that came like very close at the end of what we were talking about in that scene.
But he's also saying that includes Arab neighbors that were taping. They could have been potentially hurt by that bomb if in fact there really was something there.
Exactly.
So what's in essence happening?
Sorry, I did not mean to do this. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Okay, well.
Did not mean to do. Sorry about that.
That's okay, but the point is that what's happening is that I actually have to commend the Israeli soldiers for doing what they do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's exactly what he's explaining. And then he says, but then okay, so that's the thing. So the number one thing, and we saw it on the video, it's very clear. The number one thing, if there was anything the soldiers were doing throughout this entire video, it's trying to clear the area. And as a matter of fact, at the very end, you see when people all started rushing after the wheelchair incident, people all started rushing in. So then the Israelis were left with no choice but to explode stun grenades. This guy's trying to kick the guy to get him out of the way. But now all of a sudden people are there. And then he said, listen, we got to clear the area. And he puts the stun grenades there to get everybody out of there. Clearly, the only thing that they're doing the entire time, including the wheelchair, is trying. No, I'm saying the only thing the Israelis are doing is trying to clear the area because that's the number one thing you do for a terror attack.
But you can see that they're provoking. It's not that their intent is bad, but it looks like they were provoking the situation and not realizing that there's protocols to be followed.
No, absolutely. So then the person, this former Israeli soldier goes on. He says, on top of that, we have all these suspicions and dangers. We think there's still a terror. It's the middle of a live terror attack. There could be another terrorist coming along. And then this guy in a wheelchair shows up, and he says, "What do you do in a situation in which you're in the middle of a terrorist situation, middle of a terror scene? You assume that the guy in the wheelchair is going to be another terrorist. You assume that he's going to have a bomb in his chair or a bomb in his lap or something like that, because normal people are not going to go over in the middle of a scene and just start walking over. And then even when everybody's yelling at them at the time, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. People with guns yelling, get out of here, get out of here. So." The worst case is that this guy has a bomb strapped under him or under his chair. The best case, like the guy says, is he's an idiot. But either way, if he gets in, and as we saw what happened, he got in, and then everybody starts following him in. And then it's in danger for everybody. So this guy says, I don't know any other country in the world where people feel brazen enough to stroll up to the face of soldiers and violate simple rules like this is a crime scene you can't enter, let alone this is the scene of a terror attack. And that itself is evidence of how confident the Arabs are of not having their rights abused by Israeli soldiers. And over here, but they say that, oh, look at this is evidence of terrible things happening. And the guy was just happened to be there in a wheelchair. But and then he finishes off saying in his powerful statement, he says, I'm offended, mostly because it's common sense that any other country, it's likely this man in the wheelchair would have been shot on approach by any other security force.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah, and just like anybody who approaches a closed security perimeter. But so there's a couple of topics over here that we have to understand, but the most important one is that the media, not the most important, but certainly one of the most important ones is the media itself didn't even try to get the other side of the story. They did ask for a statement, to their credit, and this is part of it is Israel's fault as well. Israel did not, they said, oh, we're doing an investigation. They didn't go beyond that. They didn't say, hey, from what we can tell, here's what the protocol is, how people are supposed to act at a terror scene. And that's what they should have told them. They should have said, this is what people do at these sort of scenes. And it is that's the way it's supposed to be. This is what the story is. So
even if the protocols were told what they were supposed to be, I don't see that anything in history shows that they would have adhered to it anyway. So
No, but no, that's not. I'm not talking about the protocols of the Arabs. It's up to the soldiers in order to clear the scene. That's their job. Obviously, they're always going to be onlookers. Obviously, people are always going to be curious at a scene. They're always going to try to crowd in. That's what happens. And the policeman's job is to clear the area in order for, both for medical help for any victims that are out there, as well as if there's a potential danger of another explosion, to get them out of there so that they're not going to be hurt. So that's the Israeli police's, that's their job. But it's the media's job in order to be able to tell people that, instead of, sensationalizing it and saying, oh, look how awful they are, that, they're knocking over a guy in a wheelchair. And maybe that was beyond what they should have done.
Can we jump back to another important subject?
What's that?
I'm very glad that they wounded that woman.
Oh, of course.
No, because what I was going to say too is that they probably sent a woman thinking that they're not going to be able to get away, she'll be able to get away with it, and they won't do anything. And I'm glad that they actually did, that they actually took action. I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, I mean, most
because
of
now they're
attacks,
sending in women. They're going to send in anybody who's willing to go do anything, and they probably figured they won't shoot a woman.
Well, most of these attacks so far, and they're trying to change. The Hamas and Fatah are trying to change it, but most of the attacks so far have not been organized. They've not been sent by a big organization. The people have been doing it on their own.
Okay.
So it's not like they're being sent in. However, what is happening is that the women that are going are seeing the earlier women that went, and that they're treated like heroes, and that they're, and everybody makes a big deal over them. And then there's lots, whether they were killed or not, people make a big deal and they say, oh, they're martyrs, they're heroes, and they want to join in. They want to become, because there's nothing in the Arab media that says this is bad. There's nothing that says
that's
you
incredible.
shouldn't be stabbing people.
No, it's promoting it,
right,
unfortunately.
Either they promote it or they don't say anything. There was an article in the Washington Post in which William Booth the author tried to say, oh, some of them are for it, some of them are against it. But he didn't say that anybody was against these stabbings for moral reasons. He said some people were against it because they thought it was, bad, strategically, for the Palestinians to do. However, he did not mention any of the incitement that goes on that that encourages young people to actually stab. And even though she wasn't 14, she was 21. And by the way, her last name was Tamimi, according to some stories. And the Tamimis are the Western media love the Tamimis. They say that the Tamimis are, they're peace activists and that sort of thing. But, so chances are she's from that same family. But nevertheless, even though she wasn't young, there have been youngsters that have been going on and stabbing as young as 13 or maybe even younger.
I know, but the fact of the matter is that they're training their children to go out and hurt people. There is nothing and no control, and this is what they're promoting. Can you imagine?
It really is. I mean,
they're ruining the world.
Netanyahu just called it a culture of death a few days ago.
And it's true.
And it is true. And if you look, the Palestinians complained bitterly about this and said, how dare he say that? This is incitement against us. No, it's actually a fairly accurate statement, because they're the ones that say explicitly and happily, we love death while the Jews love life. And they use this as it's saying this is our advantage, because they're afraid
that they love to die.
That we love to die, so we don't care. And therefore we will ultimately win, which is obviously not exactly the case. I saw another interesting tweet, or not a tweet, I'm sorry, it was I think a cartoon by Dry Bones that said that the anti-Israel forces like BDS and the boycotters, stuff like that, they seem to win all the battles, but the Jews win all the wars. Listen,
if we could do anything to neutralize this, and so that everybody would go home and be part of a family and stop hurting people, I think that would be great.
Yep, it would. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm Elder.
I'm Mrs. Elder.
And we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.